Hey, love it or hate it, what they got going on over there at Misfits Boxing, it certainly disrupts, gets our attention, and features names we know very well. Darren Till improving to 3-0 in his newfound boxing career. Maybe more importantly, as a huge favorite, sending Luke Rockhold to hell in this bridgerweight main event at Misfits 22 in Manchester, England, over there on DAZN. It was a vicious third round knockout in which Rockhold appeared to be briefly knocked out cold. He was dropped by the same punch earlier in the fight and really beat up for the totality of the 3 rounds. Now, as Darren Till, still in his early 30s, still in his physical prime, despite losing 6 of his last 7 UFC fights to exit that promotion, is this win, this performance, and the brief boxing resume that Till has put together, Luke Thomas, good enough to start banging that drum for a Jake Paul fight? Or possibly, is there a scenario where the 6'1", 185-pound Till is actually looking too good for a Jake Paul fight after this KO of Rockhold?
I have to tell you, I think it might be the latter. I honestly think it might be the latter. I mean, okay, so let's talk about this fight on Saturday. Again, we know we're not talking about, this is not Islam versus Ilya, but it did happen, and there's actually something I think kind of noteworthy about it, BC. 2 things. We've talked about this many times, whether it's Misfits or more BKFC or something outside of at least the MMA bubble. There are fighters with names who have very up and down performances, often in UFC, sometimes more broadly in MMA, and they get out of some kind of dominant promotion. Again, this is typical of the UFC experience. Well, they'll go to BKFC, and in this particular case, they'll go to Misfits. And after a little bit of time and some wins being put together, BC, they can do a lot to rehabilitate their name. I think you have to add Darren Till to that list. His last loss in combat sports was in 2022 to Dricus du Plessis. I don't think he fought at all in 2023. He did get a win in 2024. Yeah, he got a win in 2024. And then Anthony Taylor and Darren Stewart in 2025, and so this is now his 3rd one. So he's had a huge comeback year. But in that moment, BC, in 2022, where he's losing and then he's gone for a year, and then he comes back against guys you just don't really know who they are. And even now, there's obviously it only really took people by storm in this last particular fight. I'm just trying to point out he has put together enough of a, what do you want to call it, return campaign that people, I think, are right to ask, hey, what are some interesting matchups with relevant names we can put this guy in? Maybe that's in the UFC, maybe it's not, but that's the kind of place he's in. Now, to answer the question more broadly, this is why I think he might be too good for Jake Paul. I mean, Jake Paul, I'm not saying Jake Paul can't or wouldn't beat him or even wouldn't be favored to beat him, but Till, I don't know, he seems like a real threat. You pointed it out, 32 years of age. Dude, he smoked Luke Rockhold. This was really never close at all. We'll talk about Luke Rockhold in a second because we do have to weigh what the value of that win is relative to his name versus his ability at age 40, 41. But Darren Till, dude, was methodical. I saw someone on Twitter. Do you know Smoogie on Twitter? Smoogy, Smoogie?
Yes.
He put out a comment, and I think he's absolutely right. That's the best boxing combination any MMA fighter who has done boxing has ever had in like this kind of, different world. Like you've never seen one perform quite this ably. So to me, because of his size, because of his UFC experience, because I do think he's really putting together something of a bit of a noteworthy run on the outskirts of MMA, as you indicated. And again, this is boxing, I understand. But like, that world anyway. BC, I think Jake Paul is going to be looking for either bigger names or easier opponents, not Darren Till. And I would actually kind of like to see Jake Paul versus Darren Till.
I'd love to see, I don't know if it's possible, I assume they're rivals in this space, but I'd love to see a Misfits MVP co-promotion where they really play this off as potentially the number 1 influencer boxer against the number 2. I mean, I think Darren Till looks that good. And when we mentioned his 3-0 turn into boxing, he also had an exhibition knockout win last year. So in totality, that's 4 boxing appearances, 3 knockouts. Yes, like Jake Paul's start to his boxing career, it's a varied, size, experience level that he's going against. But our eyes tell us one thing. As you mentioned, physical prime, roughly the same size as Jake. and can put punches together, has at least a remedial knowledge of head movement, which was something Rockhold did not have in this fight and easily became his undoing. I mean, look, when I saw 20-1 odds that Rockhold was going to, that it was Till favored over him, I'm like, come on, Rockhold's got a pulse. Yeah, he's probably going to lose here, but you're making it seem like it's going to be extreme one-way traffic. Oh, it completely was. I mean, I got to ask you, do we take anything away from this victory because of the way Rockhold succumbed to really the first clean punches that he was met with?
Yes. Yes, we have to weigh this victory appropriately. He did not beat somebody who gave him, genuine resistance. Luke Rockhold still got a big name, and he physically looks the part quite clearly. But he's been battered over the course of his career. I tried to explain this to people in my live chat, dude. He was a champion in Strike Force. It's 2025 for crying out loud. Like, what are we even talking about here? And so, yes, the resistance was not significant. However, BC, the ease with which it came, the readiness for it all, like the part of doing, leaning into the promotion, he seems like he's ready for a bigger challenge. I think that's the point to me. Like, okay, clearly you have to give him somebody who's trying and has the ability to do it out there. And Rockhold's not that guy.
Till may be the most, if Jake Paul's still the pound for pound best of the crossover influencer boxers. So we're talking about people like KSI, we're talking about all the retired MMA fighters that have crossed over. I think Till might be the most explosive offensively. The way that he puts together his combinations, the accuracy and power of his overhand left. Does he rely heavily on that left hand? Yeah, of course, but it is set up by at least a jab that has some type of pop on it. We don't normally get that, right, at this level of these crossover guys. Even Mike Perry, who's great in BKFC, and to the point you made about Till, has also completely restored and resurrected his name. When he boxed against Jake Paul, even though the size gap was pretty large, just no, basic understanding, it seemed, despite having a pro fight in his past, of the combination of head movement, defense, relying on the jab. Till seems to have more than most. I mean, look, the best way to try to figure out if he really would be a live body and a problem for Jake Paul, I think, is look at how would he do against the one man that did beat Jake Paul straight up by split decision, and that's Tommy Fury, who relied on his size, relied a lot on a style which was jab, jab, hold, and got up off the canvas in the final round, but he also got the win. What do you think a Tommy Fury, Darren Till fight would look like right now?
Well, they were supposed to have had a fight and it got canceled. I guess I might favor Till. I don't know what Fury's been up to. I mean, at a bare minimum, this is relevant matchmaking. This is where these.
I'm sorry, Fury doesn't want it. He turned down Jake big money for a rematch. He doesn't want it anymore.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, but this is my point. This is where the relevant matchmaking is. Like, I was thinking about this, BC. Now Till is different, right? Because he's 32. So I know we're talking about Till, but I was just thinking about this Misfits world, and we'll talk about Tony in a minute. And I was thinking to myself, like, why did this not work for Bellator? Remember, Bellator used to just have old guys out all the time, and in part, it's because oftentimes they were facing each other, and with Tito versus Chael or Chael versus Fedor, and it's just like the bottom drops out on two old guys going after it. Whereas with this influencer world, yes, you've got an older name in Rockhold, but it was a serviceable use of him this time given the rule set. And then obviously in the Tony fight, you've got this new world. Is when you pump in these guys and you start asking questions like about Darren Till versus Tommy Fury, this is a relevant way to match these dudes now. And it didn't really used to be. This wasn't a thing you could ever count on. And now it's a real space. And it actually kind of makes sense for all the parties involved. And honestly, given what's around, that's not a bad place to be.
And look, as we're talking about whether a Till versus Jake Paul fight could happen, I have to say this about Misfits, Luke. When they arrived, I don't want anything to do with them. I remember thinking, why is Callie Sauerland involved if he's a quote-unquote legitimate boxing promoter with a long history? But what him and Mams Taylor has done is get everyone's attention by doing what? By doing what the Jake Paul fights have not been able to do. The Jake Paul fights, when we expect celebrities to be fighting, we know the skills aren't going to be at an elite level, but we want to see closure. We want to see a war, and we want to see a true winner. I think Jake, maybe to his detriment, learned, became pretty proficient early enough, had such a size and age advantage on all of his opponents that it became more of a jab fest, and it was more about, can Jake's stamina hold together to get the win? I think on Misfits, they are giving you misfit boxers, meaning people without the proper background, but they're close enough to their physical prime, and they go out there and they bang, and you find out who's the better man more often than not. So that they, in some ways, Misfits, with Darren Till quickly becoming one of their lead cards to play, is kind of becoming everything Jake and MVP never did. Jake has been able to sustain this by his name, his ability to win these fights, and the fact that he keeps teasing an eventual move to real boxing. But to close out the argument that we started this segment with, I'm not sure if Jake looks at this, sees the danger that's there, and really would want a Darren Till fight, because it's all or nothing for me. Either Jake's going to eventually cash himself out against an Anthony Joshua or for a cruiserweight title, or he's going to take opponents that actually have a chance to beat him, like he did with Tommy Fury. By the way, he lost that fight. It doesn't seem to be much of an in-between anymore, because he's out of those in-between names. So, Luke, if it comes down to, do you take a fight against Till that would probably get a ton of attention, but wouldn't bring in the type of money it would if you were getting a real title fight, or a Canelo or an Anthony Joshua? I could believe, without having Jake right here to answer for himself, that maybe he wouldn't look at Till as a perfect option, even though from an entertainment standpoint, this might be a real 50-50 fight, and Jake doesn't often do that.
Yeah, and also, I mean, the one part we're discussing, you hinted at it, but we should underscore just a little bit more. Till is maybe a tough fight. Again, there's some debate about that, but certainly you would think better than some other ones, better than Mike Perry, for example. But Mike Perry is like I was thinking about this. Who's a bigger star, Mike Perry or Darren Till? And again, partly that's dependent how you answer on the market, but like the North American market, probably Mike Perry, but it's not a huge difference. But Mike was a lot easier to beat. The point I'm trying to make is Till also, I think, again, has rebuilt his name very significantly since 2022. But at the same time, he's not so big a star that this is an open and shut case, right, BC? Like,
yeah,
they look at the names he's fighting. Again, just the names, not the person, but the state they're in, but the names. Diaz, Silva, Tyson, now Gervonta. These are massive names. Darren Till is both a tough fight for him, we think, and as much as he's done to rebuild himself, not even close to some of these other names yet. So, like, yeah, I think he'd be a great candidate for a fight, but I think he's a bad candidate for a Jake Paul event.